had a prolonged period in my life where I was troubled by anger and anxiety. And then something happened that made me see everything in a different light, and life took a different course. Healing is not something that we do once and then overnight everything is hunky dory. You have to keep at it, you have to embrace it, and you will gradually see the outcomes from this. Think about our emotions as clouds, but our mind is the sky. So the clouds will pass, but the sky will always be there. Gradually, when I started building emotional intelligence, I started building my self-awareness. All this pain I was keeping to myself started fading away. Without emotions, there will be no choices, there will be no life, there will be no beauty to it. We are not angry at someone, or we are not angry at something. We are not bitter at the world. We are bitter at something we are keeping inside. We need to heal continuously. Hello everyone, and welcome to Stories and Stanza. I think this is the first episode that I'm recording in a studio close to where I live in Moonee Ponds, Melbourne. And before I start, I wanted to say a few things about why I am recording this episode. I had a prolonged period in my life where I was troubled by anger and anxiety management. And then something happened in my life that made me see everything in a different light, and my life took a different course. When I started off, I was a different person. How did this transformation happen? In this podcast, Stories and Stanza, I run a series called Fail With Me, where I look at the failures in life and talk about it, and try to get the perspective from different speakers from around the world. But this is purely my story, and I wanted to open up and talk about it. I get asked about some of these from my listeners, and I thought that it would be nice to share. I would like to add that what I'm going to share in this episode, it has a lot of knowledge from the wonderful guests who have appeared on Stories and Stanza. And my life wouldn't be the same if it wasn't for them. So here is my honest and open discussion on anger and anxiety management. The reason why I am doing it is there may be people who are in the similar situation as me, and they might be able to take something away from this and build a better life. What happened and what changed me? I would say that I started healing, and I'm still healing. Healing is not something that we do once and then overnight everything is hunky dory. You have to keep at it, you have to embrace it, and you will gradually see the outcomes from this. You need to embrace a better habit, a better thinking, and when you do that, you'll see that the mental health and physical health are not two separate things. As I was saying, that in my podcast series called Fail With Me, I talk about failure, and the concept of anger and anxiety directly links to it. If you think about it, anxiety is a precursor to failure. The worry about something that we think might not go in our favor, something that we dread, the failure. So that is anxiety. And then when something has happened and the results were not in our favor, then we tend to get angry. I'm keeping anger and anxiety at the centerpiece of this episode, but I like to say that this you can take and apply to any other extreme emotions that you may come across. So it can be applicable for sadness, depression, mood swings, can be any number of things. What is anger? Anger is something we are keeping inside. It is a defense mechanism. What are we defending? It can be trauma, and if you have any problem with that word trauma. You might have a perfectly balanced life, and yet you may have repressed memories that would cause your anger. You can think about this as a deep internal bruise that has not been resolved over the years. And whenever there is a trigger, the defense mechanism of our brain kicks in and it releases a dose of neurotransmitters, or how we know them as hormones. And this is all part of the autonomous nervous system. If you read about nervous system, especially the autonomous nervous system, you'll see that there are two components. One is the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Basically, how it works is brain works in a predictive fashion. Every second, we are getting a lot of signals from different parts of our body. It is not possible for the brain to interpret them in real time. What they do is a predict analysis. They have track of something that has happened before, a pattern, and then anything comes close to it, it triggers that particular circuit. We can call this a circuit, we can call this neural pathway in neurological terms, but it basically is a connection of different neurons that form a pattern. Whenever brain perceive a threat, okay, and I'll say why it is a threat. Think about this, that you have a cut, or you got hurt on your arm or something, then you'll be careful that you are not hurting that again. So for example, you're going to bed, you'll probably put a bandage on, or you'll try to sleep in a way that you don't accidentally hurt your sore area. And think about all these trauma or repressed memories as something very unpleasant, but it is a circuitry in our mind that brain is holding on to. And whenever there is anything remotely similar to what caused it in the first place, then brain's parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. This is also called the fight or flight response. And what it does is it releases that cocktail of hormones, and we run away from that situation, or we have an outburst in that situation. How I can explain this is, it is a test of bitterness, but because of prolonged exposure, we have gotten used to it. All our outbursts, it can be screaming or crying or throwing stuff, can be anything, and it doesn't have to be an expressive anger. Anger can be something that we are not expressing well, but it is that bitterness that I'm talking about. That is our defense mechanism. We have something and brain is triggering some known circuits. Now, what is the best part? The best part is it can be solved because of the concepts of neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity says that brain is the only part of our body that can possibly regenerate and reprogram throughout our lives. So it can potentially heal itself very well. It doesn't matter what stage of life you are. If you are embracing the right practices, you can possibly come out of your struggles with anger and anxiety. And as I started understanding this, I went back to many things that happened in my life or people I have seen, and I can interpret their behavior into my newfound knowledge about anger and anxiety management. For example, my father, he has passed away in 2019, but in his last years he was always bitter and angry, and I feel that he never had anyone to help him get better of his anger. So if you continuously keep feeding on your anger, this bitterness will only increase. And I'm here to share that the bitterness can go away. So I was saying that our brain is neuroplastic, so it can heal itself. And how do we heal? One of the studies that I came across is by Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor that shows that no emotion persists for more than 90 seconds. If we are feeling bad, if we are feeling angry, that is the period of 90 seconds, which is when our sympathetic nervous system triggers that flight or fight response. But if we are able to delay that first 90 seconds, then our rational mind will kick in, our parasympathetic nervous system will kick in, and it will look at the emotion rationally, and then we will no longer be angry or anxious or not feel that emotion. If we have that awareness about our emotions, if we are able to develop that, and when those triggers happen, then instead of reacting, we ask questions like, what are we feeling? Why are we feeling that? And if we are able to identify that reason, we would be able to isolate ourselves from that emotion, and we will be able to prevent the outcome, which is making us angry, which is making us bitter. Coming back to the repressed memories, we can melt these inner wounds with mindfulness, self-love, and awareness. And this whole exercise is called emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence has different parts. If you read Daniel Goleman's book about this, you'll see the different pillars. It has self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, social skills, motivation. But if I am to refer to the whole of emotional intelligence, I'll say that it is the intelligence where we are aware of our emotions. Think about our emotions as clouds, but our mind is the sky. So the clouds will pass, but the sky will always be there. Let's take a step back. If I start talking about emotional intelligence, from what I have seen is that a lot of people talk about emotional intelligence or EQ, but they say that as a buzzword. They say that as a term that has been coined, and they just blindly follow it. If we think deeply, then it is not just a terminology. It is not useful until you start embracing it. So all these pillars of emotional intelligence that I mentioned, self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills, they are interrelated. One is not complete without the other. So what I said about regulation, what I said about stopping the reaction, which is in the moment, that solves a temporary problem, but they do not address the bigger problem at hand, which is the repressed memories that are troubling us. So how do we do that? To understand this, we need to go a little bit deeper. So let's take that step and let's understand mindfulness for a minute. Now, I grew up in India, and as a part of our school, we were told to meditate. We were told to concentrate and calm our mind. And all my life, I've been asking a question to myself as, how do we truly meditate? Mind is never still. It just is full of such random thoughts. Then how do we meditate? I grew up with a particular lesson from my mom, and she used to say that think about your mind as a drop of water on lotus leaf. I'm not sure if you have seen lotus leaf, but the leaves are waxy. So if there are droplets of water on top of them, it just shines brilliantly like a pearl. And it doesn't mix, it just always rattles, it just moves continuously. And the same thing happens with our mind. So when we try to meditate, when we try to calm down and we say that I'm not going to let any other thoughts come in, it's quite possible you can do that. But a lot of times you don't know where to start. How do we solve anything with meditation or with mindfulness? And here is my theory, okay? And I've been sharing this with some of my friends and family. Is based on what is it that you do when you are trying to meditate? Is telling ourselves that I am safe and I am secure. And one of my guests shared something beautiful, that think about mindfulness is sitting in a room which has two windows or two doors, so to speak, one in the front and one in the back. All these thoughts can come in, any kinds of thoughts. Just sit with it, do not attach to it, and then let it pass. Keep both the doors open. There is a door for entry and there is a door for exit. Whatever thoughts are coming to your mind, don't hold on to it. Just let it flow. Be a wind, be a river, and let your thoughts flow. There is no such thing as good emotion and bad emotion. Both emotions are same. Do not let those emotions persist and let it pass. And as we continually do and we remind ourselves that we are safe, we are secure, then what happens is in our mind, all these neural pathways that have been formed, which are our repressed memories, which are at the core of our anger, they start dissolving. Your mind sees that there is an alternative path, which is why the self-regulation is very important. So you have one particular circuit, but you are also telling your brain, you're signaling it that an alternative path exists, and that is where healing begins. And healing doesn't happen overnight. You have to continuously keep at it. Stop doing all these practices, then I can go relapse and I can go back to who I was. But I am a very different person as opposed to who I was maybe a year before. Now, I have another interesting theory here is that the mindfulness has a physical impact as well. Emotional intelligence has a physical impact as well. I was saying that I had a difficult phase in my life. And what was that difficult phase? I was new to Australia and I was trying to find my feet on the ground. I was trying to settle. I was trying to blend in. And we had a small child. So our daughter was about 3 to 4 years old. And all of a sudden, my wife's mental health started deteriorating. And that made me think that I am doing something wrong. And I was clueless and I didn't understand what she was going through. And in that process, when I was fighting this, I became really angry and really bitter. I was angry at everyone at work. I was angry at my family. And sometimes I was angry at my wife. I was sometimes angry at my daughter. I was bitter everywhere. In the middle of all this, I started putting on weight, and a lot of weight. And I had a few surgeries which made me think that I am never going to get normal. And in this insecure phase, I did a lot of emotional eating as well. I used to think that all my difficulties, I need to balance that with something pleasant. So could that be emotional eating? Probably. Anger was another thing. And I am a writer and I used to think that I have to write from pain. So, in a way, I was justifying that emotional pain. Gradually, when I started building emotional intelligence, I started building my self-awareness. All this pain I was keeping to myself started fading away. I started becoming active. I started moving, walking, exercising. As a whole, my body started feeling better. I realized that mental and physical health are not two different things. They are linked and they help one another, which is why a lot of breathing exercises really help. So basically what breathing exercises do is, remember I told you about that 90 seconds ephemeral life of emotions. So basically it is delaying that 90 seconds. You breathe and you let your rational mind take over. And that is your first step at building emotional intelligence. When you stop being bitter, then you start seeing the beautiful things at life. When you start building your self-awareness, then you can tell your mind that it is time for rational. A lot of times we think that emotional intelligence is not feeling emotional. That is so not true. We are emotional human beings. We are emotional beings, so to speak. So emotions will always be there. All the choices that we make in our lives, there are certain emotions behind it. So without emotions, there will be no choices. There will be no life. There will be no beauty to it. The emotions will be there. It's just being aware of them. It's just being mindful of them. And when our self-awareness start building, then we feel more secure, more grounded, and that helps us see things differently. When we don't have emotional intelligence, a lot of things play in our mind, and our mind is clouded. So we do not take feedback very well, we react, and all these things happen. So that bitterness. And when we free our mind of them, we are so calm and peaceful. Who I am today, a year ago, I didn't think it was possible. Let's summarize all that I said. Anger or anxiety, it's rooted within us. We are not angry at someone, or we are not angry at something. We are not bitter at the world. We are bitter at something we are keeping inside. We need to heal continuously. It's not like visiting a doctor, but it's like visiting the gym. You have to embrace it as a practice, otherwise it can relapse. Our mind is a sky, and emotions are merely clouds. They will pass, and let them. Thank you for joining Stories and Stanza for this episode. I would like to thank my wonderful guests who have given me this knowledge, this awareness, and this beautiful life. I will be creating more content in the future, and please join and share with someone who might need to. Thank you.